the fun we get to have. Hi, my name is Jeff Ravage. I'm the North Fork Watershed Coordinator for the Coalition for the Upper South Platte. I'm a forest mitigation practitioner. I'm also a researcher. I work in fungal decay and also in carbon, forest carbon. So today I'm going to present the end result of 5 years of studying on creating carbon offset protocols for forestry management projects. And we basically bit off a huge chunk and said that we'll come up and create two new carbon offset protocols that will help fund forest activities. And we will write a white paper on explaining carbon forestry for other practitioners, because as we move ahead and carbon markets become more prevalent, um, it's going to be very important not only to understand the forest as a carbon system, but understand new funding, uh, new routes of funding for your projects created by the carbon market, and specifically carbon offsets and carbon insets. So I guess without further ado, if I'm presenting, how do I share my screen? I would like to show you all this.
You should be able to, let's see.
Rebecca may have to share the screen.
Yeah. Is he a
Co-presenter,
co-chair, Becca?
Becca, you're on mute.
Oh, I did a nice video turn on, but forgot to do the audio. Sorry, guys. Yeah, you should be able to scroll along the bottom and find a share screen button.
Yeah.
Or wherever your toolbar is, you should be able to share screen.
And the main thing, when you go to that share screen green button, click the little right-hand corner one, make sure share sound is on. I think that's what Rebecca just did.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. It'll probably bring up, if you're using dual monitors, it may bring up another selection. So it'll bring up a tray that'll say which of your tabs or screens would you like to share, and you'll just need to select.
I've seen that before, but I am not seeing that now.
Did you select the green button at the bottom of your screen that says share screen?
There we go. Bingo.
Got it.
Now can you see it? Well,
Yeah.
I'm assuming you can. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, so this presentation is on carbon offsets and forecasted mitigation credits. So CUSP is a nonprofit environmental restoration organization that's been around for over 20 years now. We began with the Hayman Fire, acting as the Hayman Fire Restoration Organization, and was able to leverage small amounts of federal money, using thousands, actually tens of thousands of volunteers to revegetate and to create erosion structures, and overall go in and try and deal with what at that time was a pretty dire paper by Pete Robichaud, which said that if nothing was done in the Hayman Fire, it would take between 800 and 1,000 years for the forest to regenerate in and of itself. So we became strong advocates for human intervention and community action in attempting to restore our lands and then to prepare for wildfire and also for climate change, which even back in 2002 was a topic that was easy to ignore. It no longer is, and that's why we're in the age of carbon markets and carbon forestry. So our first carbon offset protocol that we created is a methodology for quantification of biomass waste substitution for fossil fuels. The broad concept behind it was we wanted to be able to quantify how much um, fossil carbon we were holding out of the atmosphere by using what is now considered a waste product and is contemporary carbon, because as we're going to see soon, it's fossil carbon that we're releasing that have been safely stored for millions of years is behind our problem with uh, rising carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere, climate change, and global warming. The second one, which I'll probably spend a pretty good amount of time on, is the avoided wildfire emissions forecast methodology. That was originally done for ACR, so it had the same cover as the other one, but ACR rejected it. And so we went to the Climate Action Reserve and got it into the Climate Forward program. Just got off a call with them. So I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by the fact that there's a group of people waiting. It's really drag. And so we went to Climate Forward so that we could create a protocol that would not only predict how much carbon dioxide you were not in the atmosphere by controlling rampant wildfire behavior, but also give you payments on those credits before you even start the mitigation, which means that we now have a new method of financing, and it won't cover the whole cost of a project, but we have a new funnel of money into mitigation. It does not require creating debt, and is novel, and as carbon cost is going to become more and more valuable. And finally, I think I missed the slide. Oh well.
And Jeff,
Well, and finally, yeah.
Jeff, we're not seeing your slides switch either. I think maybe you need to hit, maybe we're looking at the backup one or something. We're just still on your home slide, not as a presentation.
Oh, it's showing it on me. Let's see, display settings.
And are you okay? Do you have to deal with Jeff? Are you okay?
Did I do it?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Okay.
Did you see it now?
Yeah. Yep. Now we've got the
Okay.
smokestacks and coal and tree.
And then the third thing is the third thing is the white paper, and the white paper is carbon for the practitioner, so it's people like us to bring us up to speed on what's going on with carbon, how it works in the environment, and how forests interact with it, and how we might be able to use forestry to help stabilize our climate and thereby eventually save the human race. So going to the next one. So we're going to start with an introduction of carbon cycle and its terminology, which comes from the white paper. So carbon sources in our atmosphere are the respiration of animals and fungi. So both animals and fungi inhale O2, oxygen, and exhale carbon dioxide. And plants, of course, do the opposite. They inhale carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. The other source is decay, rot of woody materials, as well as rot of animal carcasses, produce large amounts of not only carbon dioxide, but methane, which we're about to see is a extremely potent greenhouse gas. Combustion is the main source of carbon in our atmosphere right now. Combustion of fossil fuels, combustion of woody fuels, anything that we think of that burns produces carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and oftentimes methane. Certainly our methods of drilling for oil and petroleum refinement release a large amount of methane in the atmosphere. And then, of course, wildfire. Wildfire is a natural carbon source, and but of course, we all know that it is out of control. It's growing, and it's a great issue for all of us. Okay, so currently, the carbon dioxide level in our atmosphere as of last month was 420.99 parts per million. Since the end of the last ice age until the 17th century, the atmosphere's level was stable at 180 parts per million. So we have doubled it in the age of conquest of the New World, human expansion, and technological innovation. So carbon sinks are what we're looking for. Carbon sinks are how we keep carbon from getting the atmosphere. And the International Panel on Climate Change lists 6 types of carbon sinks. So living or dead organic tissues, although as we've seen, the dead organic tissues will eventually rot. We also know that downed wood in the forest can be stable for decades. So it is at least a temporary store of carbon. Dissolved in the oceans is carbonic acid. The oceans are actually the largest carbon sink on the planet, but unfortunately, because of the high level of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, it's causing the oceans to actually become acidic. And in some areas, such as where coral reefs occur, the acidity is killing our coral reefs. And it's pretty easy to be doom and gloom on that one because we don't seem to be doing anything as a civilization to stop the intake of carbon dioxide into the oceans. And the only way we can do that is sequestration, putting it in the plants, growing more trees, growing more kelp. But those are all things that either are or are going to be carbon offset protocols, methods to quantify the sequestration of carbon and turn it into cash. Other organic compounds in the soil, like lignin, chitin, so when trees decay and become soil, under certain conditions, they could be high in lignin, as the boreal forests are. And in the boreal forest, up to 40% of the soil is composed of lignin, and therefore up to 60 to 80% of the carbon in the entire forest is in the soil. Whereas here in the Rocky Mountains, the amount of carbon in the soil is about 25% of the total of our forests. And this white paper covers all those different things so that we can start thinking in terms of where's our carbon, how does it work, what can we do to enhance natural processes, what are things that maybe we don't want to do. Okay, the 5th sink is the Earth's lithosphere, or the rock, where it is settled as marble or chalk, being one of the main ones, to be stable for long periods of time. And the one is in the geological stratums as petroleum or natural gas. And that is a big reason why we want to keep all of our oil underground, not bring this fossilized fuel out and burn it, because it's been safely held for millions of years, and we would like to keep it that way. So we're running as fast as we can to find replacements for it and find methods of sequestration for the emission. The global warming potential is based on carbon dioxide. So as we all probably know, the carbon dioxide creates a layer around the atmosphere and causes what we call the greenhouse effect. So heat penetrates through the atmosphere, and when it could be re-reflected from the ground back out into space, it is trapped by that layer of greenhouse gases and re-reflected back down. So we're decreasing the amount of reflectivity out into outer space and disrupting a balance. And that's why we are slowly heating up, because we're holding more heat into our atmosphere. So It's all global warming potential is all based on carbon dioxide. Its global warming potential is 1. Its lifetime in the atmosphere varies. For example, today the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is down almost 1 part per million. So it can fluctuate. So methane is an extremely potent greenhouse gas. It lasts, 1 molecule can last 12 years in the atmosphere. Its global warming potential averaged over 100 years is 28 times as much per molecule as carbon dioxide. When average over 20 years, its global warming potential is 86 times that of carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. Nitrous oxide lasts for 121 years in the atmosphere, and it has a whole global warming potential of 265 times the warming potential of 1 molecule of carbon dioxide. CFCs, the hydrofluorocarbons, which we've been trying to get rid of since the 1970s because they ate a hole in our ozone, are highly stable. They can last over 200 years in the atmosphere, and their global warming potential is up to 12,400 molecules of carbon dioxide per molecule of hydrofluorocarbons. So it's really a good thing that it is so difficult for us to get rid of refrigerators and to change our coolant in our car air conditioning systems. So here's something that we will look at, especially as foresters and mitigators, is how much of different materials that we run across on the planet's surface contain carbon and how much of it is carbon. So we normally think of wood as 50% carbon. That's how we average it out. And that's because lignin is 60% carbon and cellulose is 44. So you can see now the lignin 60%, why we might want to increase the amount of lignin that our soils maintain, because that is a stable carbon soil. Bark, chitin, which is the shells of insects, and also the fibrous mycelial bodies of fungus, is 45%. Chalk, which is limestone, chalk, holds 11%, and there's a lot of talk about sequestering carbon dioxide by injecting it in the concrete, and we inject it in the concrete, making chalk or limestone, and then mixing it in as aggregate. So if chalk is only 11% to begin with, we'll find out that our concrete is really only like 4 or 5% carbon. So it's a start, but when you look at the carbon, the energy that's entrained into a chunk of concrete, probably all just feel good because the amount of carbon that's released in order to fire that lime and get it anhydrous is probably 10 to 20 times the amount that will be sequestered in it in its limestone aggregate. Now, biochar is looked at a lot these days, and I guess we have a biochar person with us. Biochar is approximately 65% carbon by weight. It is stable for centuries to millennia, which is why I have to over here the signs of the stability is a good thing to look at. So biochar is highly stable. It lasts 1,000 years if it's formed correctly. But if it's not formed correctly and it's just char, it can actually have higher carbon content, 75%, and it's only going to last years to decades. So that's why the method of producing your biochar is so important, and why as we move forward and we actually have a carbon offset protocol that's coming out soon. But as we look at methods of creating treatments that include biochar, we have to be very wary of people that are trying to sell us $1 million pieces of equipment that they say that can go on site and produce endless amounts of biochar. So, like we've all been told since school, be skeptical. All right. Our first biomass protocol is the biomass substitution of fossil fuels. So as we know now, we really do not want to burn fossil fuels. If we can burn contemporary things, generate heat, that should be a plus for the atmosphere. So what we did is we kind of on the back of work that was done by the in California by their air pollution control divisions, most specifically Placer County air pollution control divisions. We created a protocol that was able to quantify how much CO2 is displaced by not using oil, gas, or propane, natural gas, and using wood chips. So our model was Boulder, Colorado, and Boulder, Colorado has a biomass boiler. They heat their one of their maintenance facilities, the outdoors and transportation maintenance facility. It's a 60,000 square foot facility, all heated with wood chips that are waste products from mitigation done in Boulder County. And so hats off to them. They're great for doing it. So what we did is we modeled it and ran it through the protocol. This is what the output of the protocol gave us. And so this is a year run. And basically you can see that they started with 1,300 green tons. We basically zero it out to make sure that we're looking at bone dry tons. We look at the heating value of the materials because, cottonwood has a different number of BTUs per pound than ponderosa, than lodgepole, than spruce. So we go through all of the calculations, and in the end, we come up with 1,084 tons of CO2 is withheld from the atmosphere by using the biomass over. They use natural gas at $10 a pound, which is what the voluntary market and I've been called out a couple of times presenting this to the voluntary market is highly variable. It's different, but at $10 a ton, that's $10,000. Oh, go back, please. That's $10,000 that we have created in carbon offset protocols for the plant over a year's operation. That more than offsets the cost of all processing and trucking involved in doing it. And if we were to be in a situation where the cost of carbon was $20, we'd have saved 20,000. And if we get up to somewhere where it's like 40 or 50, which it probably will be in the future, then we might have offset the entire cost of operating that plant. And now we get to avoided wildfire.
To confirm, that was $10 a ton?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. I'm really enjoying your presentation.
Okay, so avoided wildfire is the most contentious one, and we had a lot of problems with the American Carbon Registry. One, because it's ex ante, meaning that we want our money before we do anything. Two, it is based entirely on modeling, because modeling is the only way that we can possibly comprehend all of the forces that are going on in a wildfire and also in a forest that has not burned, and a forest that has been treated and is growing back, is regenerating. And that's where we find all of our calculations is in that, the burning and then the mitigation and the regeneration of the forest. So Climate Forward is a different type of registry. It does not give out what are called ERTs, emission reduction tons. It works with a different type of, I guess it's and I'm not an economist, so that's why I'm doubling. It's a different type of economic benefit. It's similar to it, but it's predicted rather than avoided because we're doing it ahead of time. So they just like to have different names, the economists, just like we have our own little name. So This is the methodology is designed to account for emissions reductions associated with fuel treatments that modify behavior of wildfire, reducing their severity and extent. It establishes the eligibility rules and the methods to calculate these emissions and procedures for reporting the information to the reserve. It provides for independent confirmation, which is very important, so that none of us can fudge our figures, by reserve appointed confirmation body and selected by the project proponent. As the carbon markets become more sophisticated and more advanced, there will be more choice in who will be your confirmation body. Right now, within Colorado, there's like a couple of us that can do that. So as we start out, we're about to roll it out. We have passed through peer review. We have passed through public comment. We have almost everything ready to go. It's at the board of the Climate Action Reserve right now. But because of the modeling required, when it comes out in probably mid to late August of this year, we're only going to be looking at the southern or the western United States. The southern is our next chunk, but because of the complexity of being able to model all the vegetation, being able to have all of the layers for FBS, to have all of the correct fire return intervals, we have to supply all of the data to you, the project proponent, the person who's doing the mitigation, so that everything is uniform. We're using the First Street Foundation's vegetation maps, which are based on the new Missoula fire map, but it's also, as far as we can tell, it's the best U.S. model of on-the-ground vegetation and is closest to the actual land fire. Just does not cut it for as accurate the accuracy that we require. So when you go to the Climate Action Reserve and start a project, you'll be collecting all your data on your actual treatment. But when you do the modeling, you'll be using the layers that are supplied to you, because those are the only layers that have been peer reviewed. And of course, we anticipate that as the years go ahead and version 2 and version 3 and version 4 come out, it'll just get more accurate and it'll be more beneficial for all of us in calculating accurately the avoided wildfire benefits. So, the project eligibility is pretty similar to what you're going to see in any type of carbon offset protocol. The location has to be identified. There's a start date, there's a crediting period in the climate forward methodology. You'll see in the next couple of slides why the crediting period is 40 years. So the project goes on for 40 years, meaning that whoever is in charge of the project has to guarantee that there'll be no human disruption of the trajectory that we've set forth by our treatment. I mean, you're allowed to go in and re-mitigate if you want, but it's going to kind of set back. And of course, nature comes in and burns down the forest. There's nothing we can do about that, but theoretically, our treatment will stop that from becoming a huge problem. We're also looking at additionality. All carbon offset protocols want you to show that either this type of treatment is additional to the baseline to what the status quo is doing, or would not be possible to do without the additional funding that you're going to get from the carbon credits of your treatment. And this really was a sore spot for a lot of commercial loggers, but because they pretty much are not going to qualify, because obviously they can economically do their forest harvest without having to sell carbon offset protocols to pay for it. And so we want to make sure that if we're using this method, this at least for now, unique method of financing, that it goes to the people that are doing forest and ecological health and wildfire reduction mitigation, people who are out there doing work that right now just cannot be afforded, is too difficult to pull off, and is basically above and beyond what would be done on the baseline if we had not come up with this method of funding. And then there's always going to be the environmental safeguards. You know, we're going to have to comply with all regulations on the land that you're on, whether you're on federal lands, state lands, private lands, tribal lands. You'll have to show that you are working with them, but all of those lands are fair game for doing this. And then, of course, we have to say who is the owner, who's the owner of the treatment, who's the owner of the credits, and we have to not allow double counting. So double counting would be, we tried really hard not to have double counting in this protocol, but double counting could occur in some of the improved mitigation protocols, where if you go in and mitigate and then sell the wood, or sell the wood to somebody who down the road is going to make it into a permanent structure and then claim a carbon credit for sequestering the carbon in their structure, that's double counting. So, and it's actually relatively easy with a lot of protocols, considering how complex they can get. And if somebody's not watching, and that's why we have the third parties watching everything, this is a system that could be gamed, and we're trying to build it from the beginning to keep people from gaming the system, because we don't want it to get a bad news. We don't want to end up with a, some, New York Times article saying that everything we've done is junk science and we haven't done anything, which has actually happened to a couple of carbon offset protocols. And then, quantification. So, one thing seemed to be missing on slide. Now we're going to go back. Okay. So how it works is basically you define your treatment, and then we model the treatment footprint in FSVEG, and then we use that output to run fire simulations in like FSIM or Fire Family Plus. And we run thousands of ignitions just like you normally would. And we look at the change in fire behavior from the model of the forest with no treatment whatsoever. And what you're going to find is that there's not only going to be an effect within the treatment, but there's going to be effect on the outlying area, like downwind, uphill. You're going to have what we call a treatment shadow. In this protocol, you are allowed to claim carbon credits in the treatment shadow. So it actually allows you will find in most cases that the number of acres that you'll be claiming carbon reductions from is greater than the number of acres that you actually treated. Then over that 40 years, you're going to do the modeling exercise in steps every 5 years. And every 5 years, you're going to look at, does it still look the same? You're going to be growing your forest, your treatment between each of these steps. And you're going to do this at the beginning. You're going to do the whole 40 years in the steps, model the whole thing, and then you're going to come back in reality. And every 5 years, just go in and measure your forest and make sure that it's following the model. If it's not, you may need to rerun it. But if you rerun it, you might lose some credits, but you also might gain some. And also, the credits might have a different value. All the credits, when you create them, there's going to be what's called a buffer pool. It's insurance. So say I produce 1,000 offset tons, on my project. I'm only going to be able to monetize, 80, and I'm really grabbing for it right now. 80% of it, say. The other goes into a buffer pool, which is basically insurance in case of reversal. And reversal is like that fire comes through, or suddenly the spruce budworm goes, wow, you've created a great environment for me. Thank you. We're going to kill the rest of your remaining forest. So such things happen. It's not assumed that it's going to happen all the time. It's actually assumed it's going to be rare. And that's why, but each project will be putting a little bit aside in the kitty so that overall, if one project fails, all the successful projects will survive. And so here we're going to look at a model. This model was the El Dorado National Forest in California. So we're looking at the forest stocking, and we're looking at, this is our fire probability. So we're always going to be using the fire probability to tamp down, what are the chances that during this particular slice of time, a fire would come through. And it's kind of a discount, but it also, is trying to bring as much reality into our calculations as possible. So each year we recalculate it. So here's the first one, and this is our carbon offset is the delta between baseline, no treatment, and forest project treatment. So you can see it's almost half the amount of carbon dioxide over the 40 years that would be put in there if a wildfire hit. And then we're going to go through and look at it on each step in reality and find out the net greenhouse benefits over time, which in this case turned out to be 6.81 tons per acre. And this project was something like 200,000 acres. So a very large amount of money was generated by this model and this forest. What we intend to do, this is a brand new protocol. It's rolling out at the end of next month. We expect that it's going to be bumpy to begin with because all of us are going to be learning, and this is a huge learning protocol. But as we do it and as we move ahead in the future, we're going to learn from each project. We're going to get better data out of this. We're going to refine calculations, and the price of carbon is going to go up, and eventually we will be producing significant amounts of money for mitigation using this protocol. And also this protocol can link into other ones. If you were to say, take waste material from this and turn it into biochar, as long as you're not double counting, then you use the biochar protocol to determine your offsets from the carbon by creating biochar. And so we are also working on, I just began a new experiment on experiment.com. I've been working with wood rotting mushrooms, and now we're doing a new experiment to begin quantifying the carbon sequestration potential of using wood rotting mushrooms to fortify our mountain soils, create high lignin soils that sequester carbon for a century or more. And that is another protocol that is going to be able to lock in to this avoided wildfire protocol. So if you take your slash and waste and rot it with native mushrooms and recreate soil, you'll be able to quantify the carbon and the fraction of it within that soil you created that's going to last for a century, and then sell it. And that brings me to the end of our little endeavor into forest carbon so far. That's where we're at today, and I'm open for questions. I'm going to stop sharing. So, hi, everyone.
That was incredibly interesting. We so appreciate that presentation. And if someone has a question, please ask Jeff.
Jeff, thank you for.
I've got one based on one of our last calls, and then Chris jump in. But I know one of our discussions had to do with, it sounded like the U.S. Forest Service wasn't currently allowing any treatments on Forest Service land to sell credits based on the Forest Service land. And that was something that came up on the call this summer, earlier this summer. And I don't know if you know anything about that, Jeff, or if this is something that will potentially change that, if you've been, looking and piloting this kind of on the El Dorado National Forest. If that's an
Right now, it looks like they put a pause for a couple of years while they figure out what to do on federal lands. So that's true. That's beyond our scope to deal with, but a lot of it has to do with the discussions that we and the Spatial Informatics Group has had with the Forest Service on this, because the Forest Service finally has realized that they have to come up with a carbon strategy, and they have to come up with a method for carbon inventory, and then a strategy, long range goals for it. But they will do it because it's a boon for them. They're the biggest landowner, and they're the ones that could benefit from this more than anyone else. But it is a great way to get private capital funding for both public and private projects.
I should hope that will turn around someday soon too. So Jeff, great presentation. Love to get your slides and watch this again so I can kind of get down what you everything. It's kind of dense and engineering. And, but I have a small Oregon style biochar kiln I do educational programs with. And so people ask a lot of questions. It's primarily for fuels reduction projects, dealing with hazardous fuels and WUI areas. But all these types of questions come up, and understanding that the business model really isn't there yet. It's nice to be able to have a number that, this research at present, it's $10 per ton, which isn't a whole lot. But we're getting a lot of other benefits from it that, I can talk to people about. But along that line, just those benefits of being able to, okay, so some of the things that people are asking about that do matter to them with the kiln style fuels reduction is opportunities to expand their burning window, that they started getting into fire restrictions because of weather. And when we're burning inside one of these kilns, there's much lower chances of sparks escaping, as well as smoke issues. And theoretically, we should be producing less smoke with one of these kilns as well. And the other question I would have that you brought up very interestingly is, are we producing a good biochar, or are we producing a char that doesn't have that longevity of biochar?
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to run tests on the carbon hydrogen ratio in the field with a little belt kit, but it can be done, and a lot of it is going to happen, I think, through the film design, and just we've done it so many times and we've tested it so many times that we did it according to the recipe, and so we're pretty secure that we've got it. And the main thing has a lot to do with dwell time. How long does the carbon dwell at that 800 degrees centigrade, and then also it's fragile when it first comes out, because if it's above its splash point and it hits oxygen, it'll just sublimate directly into carbon dioxide, and that's why a lot of those mobile units that people are doing quench, because quenching reduces the reduces the time that you have to wait for it to cool down. So, but then again, that means you got to have a tender, and that's, you know, um, that's another thing. I think that, yeah, the simple ones are better. Even from, the studies I've seen, the Kon-Tiki, the way that they probably did it in Peru, you know, 600 years ago, was probably a good way to do it.
Yeah, the practices we are using does include a clinch because
Yeah.
you want it out and you don't want a chance for an escape. So I think the clinch is really important. It also gives it that first flush to clean out the ash and help with that pH. But so the longer the residence time without oxygen, that carbon that's at the bottom of the kiln, the more stable it is, or is there a perfect window or a range?
I don't know if there's perfect window, except, and I'm not. I'm pretty well addressed to it. I have the um, prototype of the BCI uh, Biochar Reactor sitting a half a mile from me at a slash site, and we've been playing with it. And it's a continual run thing, but it only produces 255-gallon barrels of biochar per cycle, and so what is that, like 50 pounds? Stuff is so light, you know, and it does not quench. It it waits, so you can basically just do a run a day. And that's why it's a prototype. But yeah, I've been looking at it. But yeah, because it stabilizes the structure, it increases the porosity, and it reduces that carbon to hydrogen or carbon to oxygen, whichever way you want to measure it, ratio, which is the measure of stability over time. Its permanence.
Well, thank you so much. I've made the investment. I'll be doing these biochar demonstrations, hopefully as often as people invite me to do it. So just being able to learn more, there's so much to know about biochar that I've got to be able to have a chance to listen to people like you and share this. So thank you.
What I'll do too is I'll probably send Becca the white paper, and she can distribute it freely to everyone, which gives you a good start. And then uh, I'd say by spring, the the bar the Climate Action Registry will have the biochar uh, carbon offset protocol released for the public. I think you can go there and view it already, but that way you can read and see how they're thinking, which direction they're thinking in terms of how do we quantify it, what are our best practices for producing it.
Thank
Jeff,
you.
can you drop that white paper link in the chat too if you have it handy while we're doing round robin?
It's not online
Oh, okay.
right now, but it
Okay,
should be. But it's too freaking busy.
we have about 5 minutes left, and I know, Jeff, you have to run. I just have one quick comment that I think this is something that would be really helpful for decision makers and policymakers, and for all of you that are developing this protocol when it's complete, to develop some kind of presentation or a fact sheet that is, that would you could feed to the policymakers and decision makers so they can see this, because I feel like a lot of times when you quantify economically what this is doing for our environment, for our health, et cetera, that it really hits home with that group. So it's just an idea. It just came to mind when I was listening to this and watching it.
Yeah, it would, but and there's an interesting thing too that 2 years ago a paper came out, and I think it was from University of either Utah or Oregon, and it was trying to look at what the actual monetary economic impact of a ton of carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere is. When you look at it over the next century. When you look at sea level rise, when you look at all the wildfires, all the hurricanes, all the droughts, and all the displacement of population that is going to occur if we don't get something to going, to offset it. And that cost was around $250 a ton. Now that is a really sobering number when you think in terms of coal, which costs $50 a ton, but releases 2 tons of carbon dioxide for every ton you burn. So something that costs $40 as a fuel has a detrimental side effect on the environment of $500, 10 times its cost. And in some cases, I think there are definitely some policymakers that don't want to hear that, but we love the ones that do, because we need to really, accept this. And Joe Biden actually spoke about looking at carbon prices up around 70, even above a ton, which would open a whole new world, for our line of work, because forests are one of the main carbon stores on our planet, and that's our job. We're the stewards. It's like we can really be the ones that help save the world once we get together and know what the impacts are and start getting the funding that we need in order to do all the good things that we want to do. So, and that's what we're all on the front lines trying to do. Give us money. And maybe not just even just give us money, find ways to rationalize, what a wise investment in your future this is. So
Yeah, exactly. Well said. And it looks like maybe we're on the right track from the recent news. So fingers crossed. And we want to thank you so much. And I know you probably have to run to your folks that are waiting for you. And
yeah, we would reschedule it for tomorrow.
Oh, you
So,
did? Oh,
which is
okay. I
what-
was a little worried. Oh,
I know
good.
I was too.
I felt bad.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna have to bring them all donuts because of this.
This was fantastic, and we so appreciate it. We're gonna make sure we get the recording out to all of those on the Wood COP group. And we don't have a whole lot of time, but I wanted to just mention our next call is on Thursday, September 22nd. And just really quick, also, Chris, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Because you did say you had an announcement. Got about a minute left, Chris.
Waiting for my camera to come up here. Come on, camera. It says it's on. Okay, so I gave a presentation about my biochar kiln last week at the National Association of County Agriculture Agents Conference. I felt like it was well received and well attended for, I guess, I don't know how many people are going to other things, but the room was about half full, so that felt good. And people are pretty attentive. They want to know about biochar. This association of county ag agents is super conservative. And when I went there for the first climate change talk I did 10, 12 years ago, we were avoided like the plague pretty much. Had a few people kind of come by. And this year we had a meteorologist out of University of Georgia, out of Athens, Pam Knox, give a presentation, and it was pretty well attended as well. So that felt good to see also. And the other thing that seemed interesting to me is when we started getting some kickback from the climate deniers, the old school, it did not feel like they were the gorilla in the room anymore. And she did kind of have that reaction that we kind of learned 15 years ago dealing with talking about climate change to people, but I don't think we may have to do that anymore. I think people's attitudes are changing, and they're realizing, gosh, I got all this gray hair, I might have been wrong.